later. All right. So, first of all, just a brief introduction. I feel like everybody will get tired of hearing my email or seeing my email and seeing my name after the end of the conference because I have to send you so many emails. But I am Dr. Kristie Ennis, and I taught high school originally for 8.5 years before I left and went to the district level as an instructional coach in Jefferson County Public Schools, so the largest urban district in Kentucky. I still live in Louisville, but I did take 2 years off and finish my doctorate in English pedagogy from Murray State. So the 2 years that I took off, I was teaching college, but I left the K-12 arena altogether, except for consulting. So I kind of did a lot of traveling and worked with mostly high school, but sometimes middle school teachers and students. I was doing some Saturday sessions with students, some summer institutes teachers, mentoring, but mostly for AP classes. So the nonprofit that I work with tries to offer AP courses to every student, no matter what their background knowledge is or what their socioeconomic background is. And so that has been a real challenge, and I really like it. So I still do that, but I also mostly teach college. So I teach both ends of the spectrum. I teach college freshmen, which are my favorite to teach, and I'm sort of uniquely qualified to teach dual credit because I was a high school teacher. And not very many freshman composition teachers have any experience with high school. So I really like that. And at the other end of the spectrum, I also teach graduate courses and doctoral courses in English education. So I kind of have definitely both ends of the spectrum, and I like them both for different reasons. Today, I'm going to share with you the presentation that I call Digital Mastery Defense for Equity and Assessment. But I really just want you to think about this session as a way to streamline your teaching, to free you up during the actual class periods that you see students, and to put the onus on the students to take control of their learning. You will become much more of a guide on a side than a sage on the stage, to use two awful cliches. So that's kind of really a better description of it. So secondly, the big why. Why in the world would I want to think about mastery defense for K-12 and for early college students? That usually doesn't come in until you're at the master's level, hence the name, right? So I do all this research. I put together this product, whether it's the presentation, usually a really long, something that you've written, and then I have to defend it to demonstrate my mastery in whatever skills or outcomes that I have to for my program. And I did something very similar to that for my doctoral study. But why, through that process, I was just thinking to myself, why don't we do this with freshmen, first of all? And then why don't we extend that down to K-12? Because I loved the way my classes ran at the doctoral level and the master's level. It was stressful, still, because I had a lot to do, but I knew everything I had to do from the very first day of class for the whole semester. I had a trajectory, like I had a syllabus with outcomes and the major essays that were coming, and I knew basically within, it's tentative, of course, but you know within a few days, like when everything is due and what's coming up and what's expected. And I thought, how many times I created some kind of goofy syllabus for my class in high school just to check the box and hand something to students and parents. And then I never looked at it again for the rest of the year. I was still scrambling. Like, I knew what units I was doing because a lot of that was determined by the district. But it seemed like every night I had things to do. Even if I was prepared ahead of time, I was still grading all the time. I was still putting all the data in and just constantly working. And yet I don't think my students were working any harder. And I also don't think they were moving forward, which is really the important part, right? Or if I was doing all that work and the kids were getting way better, then maybe it would be worth it, but it just was not worth it. So what this started as was me thinking, I'm exhausted. I'm teaching very difficult students, not necessarily behaviorally, because that really ever hasn't been my issue, even though I've worked with some really difficult students. But that wasn't what was exhausting me. It was all the work and the grading and the planning and the let's look at this data and all of this for what I felt like was little to no big progress. And so I just said, I'm done. I've got to do something different. And also, this is what was happening. The other impetus was I was dealing with students who were in a school that was facing priority status by the state, which I think they've changed the name for that now. But basically, our high school, needed to have more kids pass the ACT in order, or whatever the alternative was, in order to hit these benchmarks for college and career readiness. And as a senior teacher at that time, it was my job to figure that out. And I kept seeing students come out of those tests just absolutely like these poor kids right here. Like when you Google kids stressed out, this is what they look like. And this isn't even including the word school. So, never mind us, right? So all of that stress and all of those questions and those things I was wrestling with as a teacher ended up in this collaboration. So at the time, I was on sabbatical. So I was not in the K-12 arena. And I was living in a suburb of Chicago, which is a really affluent suburb. So as you can see, this group of students looks all pretty much the same. And you would be right to make an assumption that they are in a pretty high socioeconomic class, if that's what you thought by looking at them, knowing nothing else about them. They almost all come from the same kinds of two-parent homes where both parents are educated and expect really high achievement from their students, to the point where their troubles are not coming to school or doing their best. Their troubles are mental health issues. There's a high suicide rate. And just overall balls of anxiety, but darling students. So I wasn't working there, but a good colleague friend of mine was, and he only teaches one class a day because he is an administrator. So in Chicago, when you're a department chair, you're a certified administrator, and you have to handle all the administrative stuff for your department, in addition to teaching at least one class a semester. I really like that model, by the way. I wish we had more of it. But we got together, and since I was doing my doctoral work, we decided, what if we co-teach this class and come up with a mastery defense model for these freshmen? So they were ninth graders. And then whatever classes I was teaching as a college teacher, I would then try to implement that once we got it under our belt with the freshmen in high school. So the idea was, what do these kids really need to know and be able to do before they move to the 10th grade? Because we have standards, but that document is so overwhelming. Like, who is going to be able to do all of that, especially now in a digital format? Who is going to be able to ensure that every student in that grade gets all of those things done at a mastery level? Nobody. So even though teachers were on the committee for these standards documents and worked very hard to create something that's a workable and usable document, it's overwhelming to everyone. Also, you have the additional layer of, well, what's tested, right? So I have to hone in on the things that are tested, because then they are going to be ready for these standardized tests that they have to take. So all of that's kind of going through our minds, but these particular ninth graders do not have to take a state test. So we got that removed, which was great. We didn't have that layer. That said, they're all college bound. So all of them are grade driven. And we said, what if we got rid of grades? Now that might sound really radical, and it was for us, because we had to think in a very traditional, high socioeconomic level school where everyone is grade driven. How could we get rid of grades, and what would that even look like? Could we do that? How would that even work? But the reason we said that was, if we remove the grade element of it and we focused only on what is it that they need to actually know and be able to do well, and how could we teach them, or actually not even teach them, but give them opportunities to learn those things and practice those things and then demonstrate mastery? If you think about your instruction like that, instead of, well, I need to get all these kids to do these standards and I need to make sure they get this grade on this test and blah, 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 blah. If you get away from that and you get into, okay, what is it that they really need to know and be able to do well before they leave this class and move to the next level of this class, then give them learning opportunities to demonstrate that, to practice it, and then demonstrate mastery. That is what teaching should be. It should be that simple for both you and the students. So we were all kind of lost at the beginning, like, okay, how would this even look? So the two of us got together, and that's me and that's Chris on the right there. And by the way, this class is taking place in a journalism lab, so it's where they shoot the daily news. That's why it looks like some sort of strange stage. But what we decided is really it's standards-based grading and learning, right? That's what it is, because we're saying, what are the standards that they need to be doing in this class? Let's narrow it to a list of 10 or less for the whole school year. And then let's make a decision about what are our goals. So one was we didn't want to send the students home with homework because we wanted them to be doing everything they need to do in the classroom so that we could give them feedback in real time. So that was one goal. We were going to team teach. So how did that even look when I'm in a different time zone and different state and he is an admin on the side, I'm a doc student. I mean, all these things, you know. We knew that two heads were better than one, but how does that even look? And then this was pre-COVID, so, you know, the students showed up to school every day. And if we weren't going to be teaching every day, then what are the kids going to be doing all day? How does that even look? Do we offer some students time on the computer? Do we give them, you know, a chance to do reading groups? How does this even look in the classroom? And then also, how can we have the students be self-guided when they're 14-year-olds? So those were all the sort of challenges. And then above that are what we called our solutions. So what we did is we determined those skills, right? So let's see how many are here. I think this is 8. Yeah. So the first time around, we chose 8 skills that came from the standards in Chicago, which are very, very similar to the national Common Core standards. And these were the things that we agreed upon. If they could do these things well before they left the 9th grade, then they would be ready, more than ready, for the 10th grade level of English at that school. So once we figured that out and narrowed down the actual standard to what it was, right, like the topic of the standard, then we went over to what does it look like to master this academic skill? And this is the part that took quite a bit of time, because this is really like a rubric, but it's not a rubric. It doesn't have levels, notice. There's no like beginning or not meeting, developing, whatever you want to say on a rubric. That's not how this works. They either get it or they don't. So there's only a 1 or a 0 at any given time. There's no in between. They're either progressing or they're demonstrating mastery. So this is a really radical shift away from a traditional 4-3-2-1-0 standards-based grading type of model. But here's what we did have to come up with, because ultimately no one else in the school was doing this. So we had to get permission from, you know, the district to do this. And we ended up having a meeting with parents, I mean, as many as we could get in touch with, and putting out a letter about how this would work, you know, because we eventually had to give them a grade. But what we decided was they were only going to get 1 grade each semester. So before they went away for holiday break, they got a grade. And then before they went away for the summer, they got a final grade. And if you notice here up at the top, an A means all 8 of these were mastered. Down here, we had to make a decision about the number, so it's not in here on this slide. And this is actually what I did to set up this for college. So I had to change this. You know, we had different number of outcomes for the college class than the high school students did. But say, for example, for a B, they had to master 6 of the 8 or 7 or the 8, you know, whatever it was that you thought for the mastery of the number of outcomes on the list. So we worked together to figure that out, and we honestly had more trouble with the parents than we did with the school board or the students. Students were like, okay, I mean, I'm not quite sure what this is going to look like, but I trust you and I think I'm going to like it, you know? There were many tears when we were getting closer to the end of the semester and they were realizing, like, oh my gosh, I haven't mastered this number of outcomes. I can only get a C. Well, yes, this is a hard lesson to learn, right? We did call the midterm a progress report. And so if they worked beyond that semester, we could either give them an incomplete for the semester and then replace the grade later, or we could give them a higher grade if they demonstrated mastery later. So that was another option that kind of gave a little cushion for everyone, but required them to still do the work. So before I get into what this looked like, I'm going to go back in just real quickly to the session and stop sharing my screen and just see, oh, hi, Danielle. Just see what kinds of questions you might have so far, because I have covered quite a lot in about 16 minutes of me going on and on. So we've talked about mastery defense, sort of, in that I haven't told you how they're going to defend that yet, but I have told you how we set up a system where we streamlined what we were going to teach by looking at the skills from the standards that we were calling non-negotiable. They must be able to do this and demonstrate mastery before they leave the 9th grade or whatever. And then we also determined what equals mastery. So what is the criteria for mastery in that skill? So I've told you that, and I've kind of given you the background. Do you all have any questions so far about what I am sharing?
I think it's very interesting. How hard was it to get the school on board?
It's actually not very hard, but you have to come with all the reasons, right? And so because I was doing my doctoral course as an admin, we collected data. Like, we thought about this for a long time before we actually approached them. Now, this particular district has a district office of innovation. And so they were really up against some other big districts that were trying something similar, in that they were doing a standards-based, a real traditional standards-based grading. And that's kind of a buzzword, right? Like standards-based grading, or term, I should say. So it's not such a hard sell to say that. The harder sell was that, like, in the learning management system, I think for them it's like Infinite Campus or something like that. So within that, how is that going to look? Like, how will any parent or student at any given time know what their grade is if you don't give them a grade until the end of the semester? So we had to really think through that part, and I'll share a little bit more about that and show you what we do to track. But those were the two hardest things, I think. They knew that we were going to be making these kids work hard. That was not the issue. It wasn't just going to be like, here you go, have fun, we'll give you a grade at the end. I mean, so you have to really have your ducks in a row before you go. And then maybe have someone that you already have a contact with, or that you feel comfortable kind of getting your foot in the door, maybe, or someone at the district office or at the board or something like that would be on your side to try something like this. But you can also take just parts of this and then convert it into a traditional grade. Like if you're thinking, ooh, I'd like to try at streamlining my instruction, but I will not get the approval to change my grade book and all that kind of stuff. Nor do you want to bite that off right now. I totally understand that.
But I think it's interesting because K through 2 second, I believe it's second, they do standard-based grading, whereas did they master the standard? But then we jump back into the thing, and I think it's very, very interesting.
And you know why we do that? Because of standardized testing.
Exactly.
So I think that we have to be a little bit more willing to narrow things down to the skills that they need for those tests, because those tests aren't going away. I mean, at least not right now. And that's a real thing that you can be called on the carpet for. So I'm not suggesting you just shut your door and be like, F you, I'm not doing it. That's not what I'm saying, although I have done that. But, you know, what are the skills on those tests? And let's go at it from that instead of test prep. I mean, plain and simple, it doesn't work. Research shows that explicit test prep does not work. So
Right.
if we can instead model some of our assessments after it and, tie the standards that are on it, the skills, the things they're being taught, asked to do on them to what we're doing in our classroom regularly, that's going to work better. So I think, there'll be different ways that you'll think about how this might work for you, but at the end, I'm totally willing to listen to what you might be thinking of trying, or you can contact me later when, we're not in a pandemic and
Yes.
think about how you might take a piece of this and try it. I'm totally willing to work with you on that if you're kicking around ideas or wanting to know how you might approach admins about it.
And my other question was, because there's only the, I think 2 grades, or no, 1 per semester. Like, of course you would do informal assessments to see where they're at and, all that. But how would you approach the ones that were below a C at those times? I mean, because, as a teacher, you're automatically like, oh my gosh, they're not going to make it. But
Yeah. So I'll tell you, we had, and remember, we kind of picked the honors kids to start with, just so we could kind of
yes,
play with what we were doing and not have too much of that. But each semester that we've done this, either at the college level or the high school level, we have always had issues with at least a few students not pulling their weight. And so I'll tell you about that too, for sure. So thanks for asking that, and I'm making a note in case I forget, but I will definitely talk about what we did for that. All right. So I'm going to go back to sharing real quick and just show you a few more things. I've also got things loaded in Edmodo, so I'm not sure if you saw that or not, but I'll show you that so you know where things are too. So what we did, so we got this together, and then I ended up transferring it over to a freshman composition courses too in college, which was really interesting because, they didn't have grades in the grade book all semester either, which really made them nervous. But what we did is over the summer before we started, or, actually, I think we did this over a holiday break because we started mid-year to just test out like one of these first, and then we went at it from the summer onto a full school year. We're now on our 3rd school year of doing this together. So first of all, what we did is we knew we had to start the school year right with some kind of like boot camp type thing to teach them how this would even look, because these are freshmen coming from all different middle schools in the area, and who knows what they're coming from. The only thing we did know was that they had taken a reading and writing assessment to kind of place them in this class. So we did kind of know that they were generally able to read on grade level, and then they were decent at writing an essay. I mean, we did kind of know that, but that was it. I mean, and that could be just a fluke anyways. But what we did is we created these slide decks. All of them were created ahead of time. So in the summer, we had all of these done. And there was a master deck. So one that just, were slides for all year long that we would use as reference. Like if we found we needed to teach a skill, or here's how we're going to do this, just as a class. These are not exciting. I mean, do you see this? This is not fancy. It's not pretty, because it doesn't have to be. If it does drive me a little crazy. He has a much different style than I do, and this is actually his classroom, so I wasn't going to go in and decorate his slides, although he probably wouldn't have cared. But this is just like the touch base. So every time they start class, this is where they go. I think students are more ready for this now than they ever have been, because they're having to do this kind of stuff with like Google Classroom and Schoology and stuff like that. But they had never done anything like this before when we started this. I will say too, each student has a Chromebook. So we knew that. They're junky old Chromebooks, but they do work for Google Slides and the Google products, and that's all we used them for. So each day they would just have the things that, they needed to do. This might be a flipped lesson. It might be a class check-in. It might be a syllabus link, but this is all in the beginning, remember? So just like teaching them how this might look. We started with a unit on identity. We talked a lot about things like, identity mapping and theme and, finding terms and, literary terminology and all the things we thought they might need to just wrap their heads around what it is we're trying to do here. And then also we would have them do some things together. Like they would read this section of Mice and Men, because that's a required text for ninth graders in that district. And then they would do this claim writing exercise, whatever it was. So we were guiding them heavily in a more traditional way at the very beginning in the first few weeks in order to show them how this was going to work when they went out on their own. So then the other decks are poetry analysis. There's a personal writing and a personal argument deck. There's evaluation of a single text, and then there's a comparison one in the second semester. And then there's a personal narrative, so storytelling. So if you notice with poetry, argument, evaluation, and narrative, those hit those standards that I showed you. So these skills right here, those hit every single one of these multiple times. So remember I said they have to demonstrate mastery. So they're going to have to do that multiple times in multiple ways. So what we did is we created these decks that they could go through self-paced, whatever choice they want. So like we had them look at all the decks. We had them look and see what the assessment tasks were, what the texts were. And then they made a decision and they had to have a plan and they had to share it with us. Like, I plan to do poetry first because I really love it. And I like this one that you have in here. And I think it will be really interesting to do this analysis because I love poetry. And then a fair amount of the students were like, poetry sucks. I'm leaving it to last. Okay. So that also might be a little bit nerve-wracking for you because students could be at any place at any time in your semester as long as they get all of it done by the end. And you might be thinking to yourself, how do you know what they're doing? I don't know. Like, how can I give anybody a grade or know if they're behind? Because there are small, what we called, learning activities that they have to do and submit for feedback along the way. So each week, they had to at least get a couple of these done, and they submitted a form, a Google form, that told us what they completed, what we needed to give them feedback on. Of course, they could submit it any other time. Like if they wanted feedback during the week, they could do that too. But they at least had to do a check-in with us once a week. They submit the form, and then we have an actual face-to-face or on the computer now conference with them where they have to explain themselves. So if we're not seeing progress, it's caught within a week. So there's never a time where we don't know where every single student is, and we have a Google form from them that is our sort of record of that. If they don't submit the form, then that's a whole other conversation. It's a list, but it's a small list of the number of students we need to get in contact with and potentially contact parents. So these master decks are all different opportunities for them to learn. Their activities we created in a series, and then there's an individual demonstration of learning at the end, which is usually some sort of essay or a longer project, like the argument one is a TED Talk they have to create and perform, this kind of thing. So lots of different opportunities to demonstrate mastery. Do they have to do all of the decks? Not necessarily, but they're going to have to demonstrate mastery or demonstrate progress toward mastery multiple times throughout the semester, so probably yes. That's a hard lesson some of them had to learn, and they had to do a lot of work in December, the first year that we did this, because they didn't understand. They had, I did this one deck and I did a really good job. You told me. Yeah, well, you didn't do the other ones, so hello. I told you that 14 times. So don't think that they were, angels and perfect. They struggled, and we had to be on them every week, but we did not have the same kind of class going on because they were working on these decks. We were providing individual help or small group help or conferences. And there weren't, only on Mondays or Fridays did we offer like mini lessons when they were needed, because we were looking at their work and seeing, trends in what was happening. And so if we saw that we needed a mini lesson, we would either flip it and record it and share it with them, or we would do it in real time. So the way that we tracked it, because, we need to be able to tell them where they are, and we also need to be able to share with parents where they are. Let me see where I have that. I know I have it in here. Sorry, guys. I should have had that pulled up for you. Well, I'll tell you what it looks like. Basically, it is a Google form that has all the standards across the top, and I can share a copy of it in Edmodo for you. But it has all the standards, those skills right there across the top, and then it has the students' names down the side. And under each one of these skills, we make notes every time we see them. We check in with them. We check one of their pieces of work. And so I have a master spreadsheet for the whole class, almost like an old-fashioned grade book, where I have notes about their progress. And we, as two teachers grading, and giving feedback, we just kind of came up with, we're going to use language from this mastery criteria to talk about the progress, not just a bunch of narrative notes like this student sucks or, this student's awesome. We had to come up with this common language, like the student is lacking specific language, or they're doing a great job with emphasizing the point, or, whatever it is. But we had to use this specific language to address their progress. And then that way that could actually be shared with parents. The students had access to their own sheet, not other students, of course, but their own sheet at all times. And then when we talked to them in our conferences with them weekly, we sat down and looked at this with them. Like, where's your proof? What have you been doing? What have you not been doing? What is your plan for next week? Obviously, this is easier with two teachers. But you remember, I'm not there every day. I mean, I was teaching in a different state, doing college teaching, and he was there every day. So we would split the feedback duties, and, I took half the class and he took half the class. But he does it by himself now with 12th graders. And he's still finding that he has, with this, because they're totally remote, they're not in class at all. He's still finding that he has time to meet with every student. Again, this depends on compliance, and it's not going to be awesome to have to do this right now when you don't even know if half your students are alive because they don't check in, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're not available. They don't have parents helping them at home. I realize that this is not the best time to start this, but I wanted to share it with you because even if you take one piece, and that's this piece right here, with the narrowing down of what you're doing to skills that are non-negotiable for your content, your grade level for the whole year. And then think about, what does it mean to master that and have every single assignment that you give them, or opportunity, I like to call it, to demonstrate mastery or progress toward mastery, has to be tied to these. Just like you would maybe name multiple choice questions by the standards they address. Then your whole teaching is so much more streamlined. So if you take nothing away from this, I hope you take this away from it. This is like a bonus, right? This would be great if we could do this 1 or 0 instead of all these numbers that mean what? Like, what does an A really mean in your class? Does it mean they did everything you asked them to do and that they're awesome? Probably not. It means that they jumped through the hoops. They turned in all their work. Was it stellar? Probably not, because a lot of our grading systems really benefit students who are compliant, not who are necessarily demonstrating mastery. So if you think about anything, I want you to think about this, and then what does an A actually mean in your class? What does it mean that your students can do or not do? And then I want you to think about your students, because right now it is so hard for everyone. It's probably harder on us than it is on them in most cases. But we were doing this kind of learning before the pandemic, and we were doing it in our classroom. And we were still having the conversations and the connections, which is the part that's missing right now. And I can't wait for that to get back to normal without masks. But they still had computers all the time. they still sat around and, half of them were in the hallway reading a book because they were doing an evaluation of a single text that unit. And so they were reading books that were similar to each other just because the librarian helped us out and got them paired up. And then some kids were just sitting around on their computer working through the decks individually because this kid just didn't feel like talking to anybody that day. And this kid has on their headphones while they're reading. You know what? Fine. Because all of them were showing that they were making progress. The last part of this, and these are quotes from kids if you want to look at them, but the last part of this is how then did they demonstrate mastery? Because I'm calling this mastery-based instruction, right? Well, they've certainly had proof all the way through, right? But their final exam was a presentation where they had to defend their progress on all of these. So they had to create either a slideshow, stand and deliver a speech. Most of them chose a slideshow because they needed to show evidence of these. And they had to do what JCPS does now for something that's non-academic, which is called the JCPS backpack of skills. And it's things like, community involvement and stuff like that. But here we're talking about this defense with academic skills. So how is it, Kristie, that you demonstrate mastery in controlling language all semester? How did you do that? Show me multiple examples of how you did that. And if you can't, tell me what your plan is for doing it next semester. Or how are you going to work after the semester? Like if you still need to make progress on that, say we're talking in December, what are you planning to do that? I mean, that right there is the most nerve-wracking thing they have ever had to do in their lives. And by the time they were done with that, not only did they have a better sense of self, they could speak to their progress on all of these standards to anyone who was ready to listen, parents, admins, anyone. We recorded some of them, so I do have some examples of them. I think I might have them in my Google Drive. But it's just incredible how professional and grown they seem real fast after they have been, working pretty hard. And even if they haven't been working hard, they have to confront that because they are then called on the carpet to present that to you. We did have like 1 or 2 students we had to give an incomplete to, and who were not prepared to do their mastery defense in December. And we had to sit down with parents and, talk about this and develop a plan. We've never had a student that actually just like failed the whole thing, because we probably would have taken them out of the class and put them in a less rigorous class, like maybe a comprehensive level class. But I've done this at all levels. And my co-teacher, Chris, is doing this now with just regular gen ed 12th graders. So, it all depends on how you set it up and what you do consistently to check in with them and intervene when things aren't working. But we just never let anything slide. Like we were just never going to let someone fail to the point where they couldn't make a C or higher, because we were checking in with them constantly, face to face, one-on-one. So this might sound a little crazy and pie in the sky, but I did want to share with you just this whole concept so that you could think about how you might take even one piece of it and refine your teaching, because I will tell you that it has made my life much easier. You do give a ton more feedback. Like you are typing feedback on documents all the time. That is what your time is spent doing in class, either speaking with students, doing mini lessons, or giving feedback. But isn't that what, I don't know, that's why I wanted to be an English teacher. It wasn't to teach The Great Gatsby. I love The Great Gatsby, but that's not why I wanted to be a teacher. So I do want to show you what I've posted for you, things that might be useful, and I'll put more stuff in there. Like I can give you an example of the spreadsheet that we use to keep track. The slide deck is in there if you want that for any reason. I don't know why you would, other than just to show somebody or look at it again. I have a grading contract for them that they have to sign in English 101 and 102 for using this system, so that they understand how they're not getting grades all the time, but they're constantly getting feedback, and that's up to them to respond to the feedback. I also have a syllabus, a sample syllabus from the college class, if that's useful. Let's see what this is. Forgot what all I added for you guys. I tried to put anything in here I thought you might want to use. So this one is, so here it is. It is in here. See, look at that. I can get rid of her last name there. Not that anyone knows her, but it's fine. There. So see how I have these check marks? These are the things that the students have mastered, but need a little bit more, like they're showing progress, but they need a little bit more evidence. If they're just like, they're in the middle, but I have not seen mastery at all. And then if they're not enough or no evidence, we actually gave this to the students for a self-assessment, and then they used it to have a conference with us. We would put information in our own that they don't necessarily get to see with like the narrative comments I was telling you about. So this is just an example of how I might keep track, but I love the way we use this as a self-assessment for the students, and then they would have to, tell us what their plan was from there. It also works nicely for you as a matrix. So if you want to plan out all your assessments and your activities, anything they have to do and engage in should be related to these, and you should hit it multiple times throughout the semester, the unit, the grading period, whatever you want to call it, because they have to have multiple opportunities to demonstrate progress. And then I've also given you a copy of that skill criteria that is on the slide deck, the one with the 10 skills and the criteria. So the only other thing that I wanted to show you was an example of the matrix that I did for my graduate level course, which is a lot like, it's even more mastery defense because, they're doctoral students. I'm not giving them busy work. Like, they don't have time for this. They're all teachers. So let me find this matrix for you and I'll show you. Nobody wants to see my bills there. Here's the matrix for my English 955, which is a special topics class for a doctoral program on literacy development. So another way to streamline what you're doing, here's what I did. These are the number of weeks over here. Here are all those objectives. In fact, they have less than the ninth graders. They have 7. And then here are all the things they are doing, the opportunities they have to demonstrate mastery of those throughout the course, and see how they kind of cascade, and then some of them pop up again later. So just a cool tool that you can use to organize things. And this, I would suggest doing this the whole year, not for just the 6 weeks, because the skills should spiral all year long, especially in ELA. Now, some of the other content areas, I do not envy them because they have a lot of specific standards. Like I'm thinking about science and math. Oh my goodness. So they may have to do it by like enduring understandings, and then maybe like the specific unit specific things, like, I don't know, algebraic equations, stuff like that. I'm not a math person. I like math. I was pretty good at it, but I can't even imagine how they plan things. So anyway, that's all the new information I have for you tonight, but I do want to open up again if you have more questions, or you would like to know if I have some kind of document that you're interested in seeing. I'm happy to put it on Edmodo for you. But otherwise, what do you want to know? I'm also going to pop in the chat box the link to the session survey. You'll want to do this when we're finished tonight so that I can get feedback, of course, but also so you can get your certificate of attendance if you need that. So I went ahead and put it in the chat box for you. It's the same one for each session, but you'll just choose the session name for each one. So any questions?
I really like that matrix.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use it to put feedback in. So when I do have those parent-teacher conferences, I'll have something to refer back to with each of our standards to give a more in-depth look at what their grade really means.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really been nice. It was revolutionary at the college level. Like the professors are like, wow, that's really smart. And I'm thinking, Oh my goodness. Like the one thing you realize when you're a college professor after being a K-12 teacher is that they don't have a clue about pedagogy. They're all experts in their content, right? And I'm not saying all. There are plenty of them that have, good sound practices, but the things that we take for granted, we're like, "Oh, that's just best practice." They don't know it all. So the matrix has been pretty revolutionary at the college level. But I can share, if you need me to, I'm happy to share a copy of that one that I showed just to remind you.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great.
I can put that one in there. I probably have a couple other ones too, just in case. All right. Anything else you might want or need?
Maybe you could talk to the state and see if you can get rid of the standardized and go to standard based.
Yeah, let me just get on that for you. I probably have death threats.
I know there is a district in Florida that was trying it. They went to a different type of, and they got rid of the standardized test and they did a standard, like per quarter. Like once they went through the content, it was they were given like mini assessments, and it was mastered, progressing or not mastered, and then if they mastered it, they could go on to the next. It was pretty neat. But,
yeah, I've seen that too, and that sounds very similar to this.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. They called it Navi, the new way of grading that, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I just wonder. So what we're finding though is, of course, not all the grades, like, of course, not all the composition courses work this way in college. And then you've got, after they left our 9th grade class, they didn't go to a 10th grade class that ran like this. And they just hate going back to the traditional homework, jump through the hoops, do this worksheet. Like they hate it because the students are then asking the hard questions. They're like, why is it that we're doing this?
Yeah.
Like, what am I demonstrating mastery in here? And, the teachers are like, which we like because, good on you. I mean, don't be disrespectful, kids, but, good on you for making your teachers think. And so we're hoping that it's already spreading throughout his district, but, now he's in the 12th grade. And that's where I really think this should start. I think we should start it and then move backwards.
Yeah.
Because that way you're not prepping a bunch of and have to promptly go back to the way things used to be.
Yeah. But I think what they're not realizing is, if they're doing these critical thinking and being able to take feedback and change and, grow, then any standardized test, they would be able to, manipulate with their critical thinking skills. They were like, oh, if we did this, then this is ABC, this is easy.
Exactly. And, we don't have the data quite yet. We will after this year, because all the students we started with will be taking the, SAT, ACT, and AP course tests. So we'll be able to really see, not that we're the only factor, but just how those kids do in comparison to others. I just think many of them are going to be way over prepared for college, which is good.
And you know what else that shows? You're able to show the motivation versus the
grade driven, right?
teaching.
Like, it's really becomes more about
ownership.
Yeah, ownership of what they're doing, and they have to show proof.
Yeah.
This all started for me as a conversation with at the district level with high school teachers from all grades. So we had like one representative from every school sitting in the room from all the English classes. And we said to them, what does a high school diploma actually mean in your district? And they just looked at us and they're like, well, I mean, it means that they did what they needed to do to graduate. I said, does it though? Because I know some students who graduate who didn't do nearly what these other kids did, and somehow they all get that same piece of paper.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is that what you really want? Is that the message you want to say? Because I guarantee you there are students who graduate who can't read.
Right, exactly.
And that is sad. So I said to them, okay, we need to be very clear at each grade level what it is. So we kind of engaged in the work of doing that initial slide with the skills for each grade level and saying, like, this is non-negotiable. We are going to guarantee that all students in the 9th grade in this district are doing this, and they are demonstrating progress toward mastery in this. And so that was revolutionary, and I led that work in the district, but I don't know what happened to it after I left. I don't
Right.
know if they're still doing it. I don't know. I can just, it was so hard. It was very hard. But
Yeah, I don't know when the movement of deconstructing the standards came out, but I could definitely see taking some of that, to put in what skills they do need to meet that standard. And
yeah,
I think that with the units that people already have made, they could incorporate this at a, not as an in depth, but definitely to an extent where they could still give the grades per week or per semester, like depending on what they're doing, but
yeah.
still have it as being a self motivated learning.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And like I said, at the college level, I've been lucky enough to have a composition director at U of L who gives me the latitude to try, pretty much whatever. And, you have a lot of autonomy as a college teacher, as long as you do what the requirements are for the course, whatever's determined from the department, then you can kind of do it however you want. So I have been able to play a little bit with it. And my biggest hurdle is not the students. They are willing to do it however I say, really, for the most part. It is the grade system. So, like, I still have to put grades into Blackboard, for example.
Yeah.
And so that's been the biggest challenge. And I ended up just converting it to a 1 or a 0. So, like, they
Yeah.
either got a 1 or they got a 0 if they, I created like a scale for it or whatever. And, not even a scale, because it's either a 1 or a 0, but it was just basically, if you get a 1, you did this. If you get a 0, you get this. And then you just count them all up. And at the end, you know, we'll have a conversation about whether that equals this grade or this grade or this grade. Obviously, at the midterm, we have a conversation too, because I don't want any of them to get to, week 14 out of 16 and they'll be like, we don't want to go there,
Yeah.
which can definitely happen in college, especially when you teach online like I do for a lot of classes.
Right.
They just sort of are like plowing ahead and you maybe don't ever talk to them. So, I've played around with it at the college level. And for anyone who ends up watching this recording, because I know we have a couple college people in our registration list, let's talk about it. Let's throw it around. I hope people will reach out to me. And like I said to you, Amanda, if you get into it and want to try any part of it, just send me an email. I'm happy to kick around ideas.
Oh, I'm definitely one, because I do have an idea, because I think a lot of teachers would rather have, get rid of the worksheets. But like you said in your presentation, that getting away from the grades scares people if they don't have something to show that it's not necessary. I think it hinders more than it helps.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking about getting away from slide decks and getting into the hyperdocs for each one.
Yeah.
Because if I do one hyperdoc for each unit that I have because my courses are 16 weeks long, usually 15 or 16 weeks long for a semester. If I do one hyperdoc per, say, unit, and I have 4 units, then I'll just keep refining the hyperdocs, and like each week they will do a different section of it. I mean, it's going to streamline everything I do, because I generally teach the same classes. I'll teach 101, 102, 105, and then I'll teach like occasionally some more like dual credit. So it's still the same class, but it's high school students. So I have to kind of, change it up a little bit.
And then it'll give you more time to feedback on their original thoughts, which that's what we're having trouble with, is getting kids to, have originality. Like, just say what you think. Say what you think.
Don't be worried about what it looks like. Just get it out.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know what I think. That's my 14-year-old's favorite thing to say.
Oh yeah.
God. And he's in an IB program, so I can only imagine, the students who.
I know.
Oh gosh. So
but
anyway,
I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it.
Good. I'm so glad. And I'm glad you're with us. And it's Georgia's loss and Kentucky's gain.